Question 6, we're asked to find the mean from a frequency distribution. We don't have all of the data values, we just have the frequency distribution, so the best we can do is estimate, and this is the best way of finding that estimate. So we have our classes and frequencies listed here, and you can see the calculations here on the document. But this is one question I think you really probably want to use Excel for, and so I included this distribution in a table form in that Excel document. And again, I'll remind you that I have a Mac. This does not look exactly the way your version of Excel will look, or exactly like the version of Excel we have in the classroom looks, but all of the operations and functions I'll perform here are done exactly the same way. So the first thing we want is all of the class midpoints, and to find the class midpoint you want to find the average of the lower and upper class limits of each class. So the way we do that is to type equal, because we're making a calculation, equal, and we want a left parenthesis because this sum is going to be our numerator, and we always want to segregate out the numerator because Excel, just like your calculator, knows the order of operations. So we're going to add 90 and 99, but we want to do this for 5 different cells, so it's going to be most efficient to select that cell. So I've selected D2. I could have typed it in, but in this case I chose to select it by clicking on it. And we're going to add, so we type plus. The upper class limit, this cell, which is E2, and so I click on that. And now I need to close those parentheses because that's my numerator, and that's going to be one number that Excel will do first, hence the parentheses. And then I'm going to divide, so that's the /. I'm going to divide by 2. And then I hit enter or return, and that gives me the class midpoint. Now I want to do this for all of these pairs. The best way to do that is the quickest, most efficient way to do that is to go back up to this cell, and we get the little square in the lower right corner. It's green for us in the classroom. It's blue on my computer, because I guess Apple has to be different. But when I hover over that, you'll see that the white plus turns into the solid black plus. Click then and drag down through all 5 cells, and that auto completes the remaining 4 cells, so you have the class midpoint for each of these classes. Now the next calculation we want to perform is the multiplication of each frequency times each class midpoint. That's why this is labeled f.x. So I click in this first cell. I'm going to do another autocomplete, and so I will make the calculation for this pair of cells, this frequency times that midpoint. And so in this cell I type equal, and I want to multiply 4 times 94.5, but again you indicate the cell, the 2 cells, so you type F2, and notice it doesn't have to be, as I've said before, it doesn't have to be the capital letter. It is not case sensitive. F2, and then the asterisk is the multiplication operation. If you have a number keypad on your computer, that key is located in 2 places. It's the Shift 8, or off on the right side where your number keypad is, there's an asterisk over there. And then cell G2. Now that's going to multiply cell F2 and cell G2, and that'll give me my frequency times class midpoint, and I hit return, and that makes that calculation. Now I want to go back up to this cell, grab the lower right corner, click and drag down through the remaining 4 cells, and it auto completes all of those multiplications. Now, as I pointed out in class, these 3 green squares, or these 3 green are cells that I've highlighted in green, they're just there to remind you, hey, you need 3 more things here. You need to make 3 more calculations to complete this. You don't have to put these calculations in exactly those cells, but I put them there just as a reminder that we need, for instance, in this column, we need the total. We need the total of all of these frequencies here. And so to do that, you type in that cell, I've selected that cell, equal, and we want to type sum, S-U-M, and then we want a left parenthesis. Excel prompts us for the values, so it's asking for all these numbers here, or whatever numbers we want to add, and we know that that's these 5 numbers, so we click and drag across those 5 cells to select them all. We could have also typed, as you can see there, we could have typed F2 colon F6, and then a right parenthesis to close, and when we hit enter, that gives us the sum of those, which we could have added up without Excel, but it just seems convenient to use it because it's there. 4 plus 6 is 10, plus 7 is 17, plus another 4 is 21, plus 1 is 22. Now, in this square, we want the total of these frequency times class midpoint. And let's take a look at that over here on the document, on the review. Those calculations are shown here as a reminder of what it is you're doing. And you can do this with a calculator if you prefer, but those are the operations that are being performed. And so then we come back over here to Excel. We want this sum, so we do the same thing that we did in cell F8. Over here we type equal sum, left parenthesis, and click and drag over those 5 cells. Close the parentheses, hit enter, and 1729 is the sum. And the last thing we need to do, is in this cell, divide the larger number by the smaller. Now, in a previous question, we divided a smaller number by a larger to get a relative frequency, to get a proportion, to get a percentage after we multiplied by 100. But in this case, since we're performing a different kind of operation, sorry about everything jumping around there, I don't know why it does that. We're going to divide the larger number by the smaller. So in that cell, we select that cell and we type equal. And we can either type in 1729 or we can select that cell and then the / for divide, and then this cell, F8, to divide by 22, and we hit return or enter, and we get the estimate of the mean. So this is an estimate of the mean from a frequency distribution. And I believe we can see here that that's exactly what we show on the document, on the review. Okay, now we'll move on to question 7. Question 7 is going to use the range rule of thumb. I kind of glossed over this in class and didn't make it sound very important, but or at least this part of it down here. But we will use this range rule of thumb found on page 100 for a couple of different calculations here. the first one we did a couple of times, which is the minimum usual and maximum usual value from a normally distributed data set. And we're given the mean and the standard deviation in this question. And so to find the minimum, we just subtract 2 times the standard deviation from the mean. This symbol, if you're not familiar with it, plus minus, this is a compact way of saying that we have one value and we're going to add something to it, and we are also going to take that value and subtract something from it. It's a way of representing 2 calculations in a compact way. So here's our mean, 1173, and we subtract 2 times the standard deviation, 2 times 97, which is 194. You subtract that from 1,173, and you get 979. Now, my maximum usual value I would find in a similar way, except instead of subtracting, I add 2 times the standard deviation. And when you do that, you get 1,367. Now, part B asks us if we know a maximum and minimum usual value, how do we find these values, the mean and the standard deviation? Well, the range rule of thumb tells us that we can approximate, remember that's what the squiggly equal sign means, we can approximate the standard deviation by dividing the range into four parts. So the maximum value minus the minimum value is the range. It's the range of usual values in this case. And so then we divide that by 4. Now don't forget parentheses. If you enter this into a calculator, don't forget to subtract 2140 from 2480 first before you divide by 4. Now, if you do this in 2 steps, you don't need parentheses. You can subtract 2140 from 2480, and then what your result is, you can then divide by 4, and that's excuse me, 85. Now the mean is just going to be right in the middle of these two, because remember, the mean is right down the middle between plus and minus 2 standard deviations. So to find that midpoint, to find any midpoint, you would add the 2 values and divide that sum by 2. You add these 2 together and divide by 2, you get 2,310. So there you go, there's questions 6 and 7. And I'll interrupt this and make the remaining 3 questions, or put the remaining 3 questions on a separate video.